Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as VRTrader.com. He's speaking to us from Arizona. Welcome back to the show, Mark.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mark, do we still have a special offer for listeners?
Yes. We are doing quarter off, not half off. So we're doing 2021 quarter off. And that's for any of the products at VRTrader.com. You go to the website, and when you pull up one of the newsletters and enter your personal information and credit card, there's a little slot for a promo code. So if you stick in 2021 quarter, QUARTER off, you get 25% off for any of the letters for any time frame that you sign up for. So that's the deal. Thank you.
Right now, I'm hearing a debate between will there be hyperinflation or will we go into deflation, perhaps in a critical way. What's your point of view right now?
I can't make money even thinking about that, Jim. I mean, there's no way I can trade and make money worrying whether it is hyper or lower inflation or no inflation. I just sort of follow the markets and trade accordingly. I mean, that's really it's sort of a waste of time. Honestly, worrying about that. I mean, as it unfolds, we will hopefully be able to trade with the trend. Right now, it appears to, with the uptick in interest rates, it basically appears that we are starting to see some of that as the bond market is anticipating what the Federal Reserve, is not wanting to talk about. In other words, they haven't blinked yet. And basically, when they do blink and they start to raise some rates, then there's going to be triggers in all kinds of financial markets and so forth. But the markets, it's a tail wagging the dog, essentially. So we're starting to see some signs of that. It may turn into something super inflationary. We just don't know that yet. It may be modest, but the Fed's not acknowledging it right now. But they will probably come to do so. So just assume that rates are going to uptick a little bit, and we all have to figure out how that's going to impact all the various markets, the currencies, gold, silver, stocks, and so forth. And we'll have to look at each of these and try to evaluate them independently. There's no one answer. So we can talk about all that if you like. But basically, there's some inflation on the horizon, and we'll have to just see if it turns out to be something, more significant that some of the bears are, I guess, advocating or speculating about.
Now, people look at the Fed and think it's a federal organization or a federal government body. It's not. The government appoints the chair of the Fed, but the Fed itself is made up of the biggest banks in the U.S., in Canada, same thing with the Bank in Canada. The chair is appointed by the government, but it's made up of the biggest banks. But you have the feeling, the average person thinks these are government organizations. And why does the government always feel if they don't talk about something, it won't happen? And the best example, as you just said, is interest rates. They're going up, but according to the Fed, hey, we've got a handle on it. It's not happening.
Yeah, it's called jawboning, and sometimes it works a lot. And versus taking action. Greenspan was culpable in this area. Bernanke, the whole slew of them. I mean, it's basically do a lot of talking, and maybe you could affect the markets and accomplish your objective without actually doing it. But you talk about the Federal Reserve. It's really a pet peeve of mine. Nothing I can do about it. I mean, created in 1913, and at least in terms of the U.S. dollars, lost way up there. Some say 97, 98% of its value under the tutelage of the Federal Reserve. And then you got that great book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, which everybody should read. Of course, it's very difficult to read because I think it's about 600 pages, but it goes through the history of the creation of the Fed and, you know, how the Federal Reserve was actually owned, the private corporation, private federally chartered corporation. In fact, if you go to the Federal Reserve in Washington and you go snoop around a little bit and ask questions, the guards and so forth that are outside are privately hired. They're not part of the U.S. government. It's a private, you know, corporation, and as you alluded to before, according to the original charter and the way it was set up, the shares were issued to the private banks that are actually owners of the Federal Reserve. There's no discussion of this whatsoever, and who knows, over the years maybe they changed it and haven't told us, but that's how it was originally created. So it's a puppet institution, and should have been dissolved a long time ago. I'm sort of in the Andrew Jackson camp in the 1830s, how he dissolved the then Federal Reserve or National Bank at the time because he got so disgusted with what they had done or what they didn't do. So, you know, if I had my power, I'd abolish the darn thing, and you know, we'd have, you know, let free markets dictate things a little bit here rather than this manipulation, which is not very good. I mean, look at all the mistakes. The Fed's always late in what it does, so it doesn't admit it. And I'm sort of repeating the same little analogy, which I've done before, but Alan Greenspan, I used to make fun of him, then used to compare him to a New York City taxi cab driver where he would slam on the accelerator and then slam on the brakes back and forth, and he didn't know what the heck he was doing back then. Maybe he thought he knew what he was doing. So the Fed has caused more distress, more problems than it has helped, and it reacts rather than forecasts, and, you know, any economist who thinks he could predict or has had a successful track record of predicting the markets doesn't exist, and you got all these economists sitting there. Janet Yellen, I guess, is one of the most noted people, though she's not on the Fed at the moment. She's Secretary of the Treasury, but these people come from academic backgrounds, don't really understand the real business world, and work on theoretical models that just really don't work. So remember, Bernanke didn't admit that we had a financial crisis initially back in 2003, 4, when it all sort of started, 6, 7, 8. You know, finally had to come around and you know, admit that. So it's really wild. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. Sorry about that.
We love the tangents. That's where all the good information is. As our market historian Bob Hoy likes to mention, since the Fed was created, and they said it was created to prevent recessions and depressions, they've had 18 recessions or depressions. We're probably in number 19. But I know the government's going to try to claim officially we're not in a recession because they'll manipulate the GDP numbers to make it look like, well, okay, they were slow for 2 quarters, but in the third quarter, the GDP exploded 5%. So technically we're not in a recession. But walk down the main street of any town right now, half the windows are boarded up. Is that something you would see outside of a recession?
You know, this gets back to government reporting and data and what you can believe that the government tells you. I mean, you know, we go back forever on this. So, yeah, data is manipulated. I guess one of the classic examples of data manipulated, I'm getting off the beaten track here a little bit, believe when we had the financial crisis, 14 years ago or whatever, if you remember, the government recalculated how banks could appraise real estate properties. You know, it wasn't based on the market value at that point, I believe. They said you could use their costs in it, and when they went in to bail them out, they redid all the accounting, and I apologize for having all the specific details. Maybe some of the other guests on your program have that, but I remember they completely changed the accounting rules, manipulated them in such a way that it would make the banks look better at the time, where in reality they were all officially bankrupt, completely bankrupt. I still think they're bankrupt, just being bailed out by the government. So just fun stuff. We can't change these things. We know it's corrupt. We know the government's corrupt. Just about every government's corrupt. We know the Fed's corrupt. We know all these things are corrupt. So, you just sort of have to trade the markets and follow them. You can't really believe most of what you hear and read, whether it's the news about COVID, the vaccine, government policy. That's why I sort of look to the markets So when I say to you, like, the bond market is upticking and, we're long the inverse ETF for the bond and trading that accordingly, I'm not worrying what the government is telling me. I'm looking at what the markets are saying to you. So when I first got into the cannabis stocks back in 2014, I wasn't looking at what everybody thought about cannabis or what the government's opinion was. I saw a huge volume coming into these stocks. And I was one of the first, if not one of the, I don't want to say the first, or the second newsletter writer out there to come out and say these things are big buys, just because I saw the market talking to you about what was going on. So I think this is what you really got to do, whether you're trading the S&P, gold and silver, Bitcoin. You got to look at the tape action. You got to flow with what the money is going. Follow the dollar, the old expression. So that's how I guess you can remain a survivor in the financial sphere, for hopefully decades, by just like tuning it all out and watching what the tape says.
Well, how governments look at the world and how unrealistic it is. In Vancouver, your municipal taxes are not based on what you have, but what you could have. If you have a 2-story business, the government sends you a tax bill for a 70-story building because it's zoned so that a 70-story building could be built there. There's a great joke that goes like that as well. Guy checks into a hotel, gets the bill, and he says, well, look, it says $100 a night. Why is my bill $300? Well, there's a bill for being in a resort. You could have used the hot tub. You could have used the weight room. You could have used the spa. You could have used the swimming pool. And the guy says, give me a second. And he says, now here's my bill. And the guy says, $300. What's that for? And he says, that's for sleeping with my wife. And the clerk says, but I didn't sleep with your wife. You could have. That's how governments operate.
Wow, I love that story. That's something else.
We'll have
really
more
cool.
with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, some people are saying the U.S. dollar is what they still have confidence in. Do you?
Oh, God, this gets down to that old expression. I think Ian McAvity first said this a few decades ago, who did author Deliberations. He was an acquaintance of mine. I like to call him a friend, but, we only spoke occasionally, saw him occasionally. What was that expression? It's the best horse in the glue factory, I think, something to that effect, if that's the expression. It's the last horse or the best horse in the glue factory. So they're all the currencies, ultimately history says they all go kaput, but the dollar, is, the last survivor, at least for now, unless as the forces out there seem to indicate that, China will rule this 21st century the way they're going militarily, economically, and politically, and in which case, I guess the yuan will become, the main currency. But, who knows if that's 10 years or 50 years from now. But for the time being, the safe capital still flees toward the dollar in the U.S. until all this changes. So the answer, it's the best of the worst.
Is gold a safe haven, or again, does it depend on your circumstance?
If you can trade gold, it is. If you're looking, to make money and trade, if you're looking for on a 5,000-year basis as a store value, that if everything absolutely goes to hell and, you need some vehicle for a medium of exchange, gold and silver in your pocket is probably not a bad thing to have, and I think that's what I think the perspective I guess you have to take is having some stored away somewhere in the event that things absolutely collapse, nobody wants to accept your currency anymore, or the ATM machines don't work, or the government decides to confiscate all your cash, and they're talking about making it all digital now, and people may or may not have a decision in that regard. But in the worst case, you got to have gold and silver in small denominations, so people would accept, a coin for a stick of butter or something if it got to that level. So I think it's a store of value long term, great. But I'm not in the camp that. I mean, yes, it's had a nice return, but so has stocks. So it's an investment vehicle, a trading vehicle. The other problem is it's manipulated. I mean, you can spend hours discussing that situation, Jim. I mean, we've got that great organization, GATA.org, Bill Murphy and that group since mid-90s has been talking about all the gold suppression going on and all the shenanigans with the banks lending out gold that really doesn't exist, and on and on and on, and whether Fort Knox really has the gold or where it really, where the gold really is, and on and on. So, you get into this whole discussion that if it's being manipulated, suppressed, then gold should have been thousands of dollars higher than it is now. And why would governments want to suppress gold? Well, obviously, people see gold going up, they think confidence in government goes down, and that's not what they want. So it makes sense that they would try to suppress the price of gold. And with the commodities, the futures market, the paper market. We can again spend hours on this conversation, but the government's out there, or whether it's J.P. Morgan or one of the big arms of the government that act in these futures markets, for example. We know J.P. Morgan was sued for manipulation. There's actually court cases, so we know that already exists. So you can research that. But if you got an unlimited checkbook and you can hit the bids on the futures contracts at the COMEX in Chicago or in New York, and keep the prices down, and you don't have to deliver the gold, and you just got all this ability to play with the paper market, not the real market, you can succeed in doing that, and I believe that's part and parcel of what has been going on. So this is my problem with the gold market. It really isn't a free, trading market. Of course, you could argue a lot of markets aren't either if you got government intervention everywhere, but this is a notable example of an extreme which has gone on for decades, and if that's the case, you got to trade it more, because will it really reflect its true value and worth if the government's in there? And the question is, will they ever get out of that business of getting in there? Then that doesn't seem likely at the moment.
We've all heard the stories about in the situation in New York. I think the Federal Reserve is on one side of Wall Street and J.P. Morgan is on the other. You go into J.P. Morgan and say, I would like to see the gold you're holding for me. They go over to the Federal Reserve. They roll a cart in a tunnel underneath the street over to J.P. Morgan, and they say, here's your gold. Now, if you want to trick them, now give it to me. No, I want that entire cart full. I have a truck waiting outside. Give me the gold.
The way to store gold, I'm told, and I'm not an expert at this, so you got to do your own research. But the people that I know or have told me who actually trust that their gold is really there, have it in Switzerland. And apparently, your bar is actually numbered. There's a number on it, from what I'm told, and that's your bar, and nobody else can get that bar, and it has to be in Switzerland. Apparently, that's the only place, certain banks there, and that do that, and you can verify that. So that's probably the only way you really have, know you can have physical delivery and have your gold bar waiting for you. Of course, the gold bar is one of these huge bars. It's not the kilo bar, which I think is like 32 ounces. I think it's the big one, like it's worth like $800,000 or something for the bar. It's not the little 32 ounce, which is, would be worth what, 80,000 or something. So, if you can deal in that kind of market and have that kind of money, I think that's, from what I'm told, that's how you can really secure that you really own the gold and can get delivery, when you want it.
Yeah, the Royal Mint in Winnipeg tells people during a tour, if you can lift that gold ingot, it's yours.
Yeah.
Try picking up like 82 pounds with your fingertips.
Right. I'd like to take him up on that one.
Nobody's walked away with it yet. We'll have more with Mark Leibovit right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Leibovit. Mark, we always like to talk about something that's caught your eye towards the end of the show that you think could be the new hot trend or latest trend. What is it this week?
Oh, gee, what's the newest trend this week? I mean, we can talk about a lot of things. We have, I'm doing a little article on the super worm moon, which is coming up here on the 28th of the month. You can do a little research. It's like a super moon, meaning that it has one of the closest approaches to the Earth, so I'm watching that. I'm not saying it's going to have any impact on the markets, but, it might, perhaps. So I'm doing a little article on that in my newsletter tonight. I'm also focusing on, unfortunately, the vaccine situation, and I don't want to sound like I'm a doom and gloomer here or anything, and, this is one reason why they would try to block the show, but, unfortunately, a lot of research that I'm seeing is telling me that we may be facing one of the greatest health calamities of in modern history, that this vaccine or group of vaccines could hurt as much as if they claim that it would help. So there's an article I'm going to be sticking in my newsletter about that, all the research coming out from sources that the main press don't want to talk about. So that makes one fearful about, jumping on board that. And if that's really true, then maybe all the companies that are selling these vaccines, and this really comes out as reality, they're going to collapse. Of course, the government's protecting them against lawsuits because that was the only way they would produce them. But there could be some real downside here, which I really don't like talking about, but it is a story, it is real, and it is something that we just can't ignore. So we can sit here and try to pretend everything is great, and it's not. I'm also very hopeful, and I'm glad that I'm reading that CNN's ratings have collapsed recently. Of course, they've been the nemesis of the conservative movement, and I'm doing a little piece on that one. Basically, they can't talk about Donald Trump anymore, so apparently the interest has gone away, and financially they may get into trouble. Of course, I think they're owned by AT&T, so I guess they got deep pockets behind them. But one of the greatest things I would hope to see happen is CNN collapse financially and go out of business, because they did such a disservice in terms of providing the real news stories of what was occurring, both politically and financially. And they unfortunately, I come from a journalistic background, so I'm very, sensitive to that fact that they were liars and had their own agenda. So a lot of interesting things going on out there. I try to look at a lot of stuff. And as far as winding out this interview, I mean, as I mentioned in my previous interviews, I'm not very excited about the markets moving forward. I think it's going to be a choppy year with a downward bias, and you got to be really careful. And it may be related to the interest rates. It may be related to maybe a resurgence in COVID, or maybe a realization that the vaccines aren't working, or maybe there's another outlier event out there that's brewing. But, the way I'm reading the tea leaves, you got to trade the market close to the vest here. There's going to be some always opportunity, no matter how things are bad. Like, for example, we made some money on our short ETF positions yesterday, before this little rally today, and there's always opportunity, but I don't think this is the buy and hold market that we had from March 2020 up until the current date. So I think you got to be very careful. And by the way, that applies for all markets, all the commodity markets, all the stock-related markets. There's going to be a lot of volatility, and there may be some surprises to the downside. So with that, hopefully I've given you some valuable insight.
I personally saw a reason not to believe CNN during their coverage of the Vancouver Winter Olympics in 2010. One of their reporters was standing there at Olympic media headquarters saying, "The bright lights of Whistler are glistening behind me in the Rocky Mountains." The town of Whistler, where the Nordic events were and alpine skiing, is a 90-minute drive away. Those were the lights of a local ski resort, Grouse Mountain. The Rocky Mountains, I think, are 600 or 700 miles away from Vancouver. The mountains here are the coastal mountains. Those were two reasonable facts they could have looked up but didn't.
Yeah, I guess mountains look like mountains to these guys, right? So, they're not interested in detail. They're interested in their own agenda. So maybe the Rocky Mountains, they have some agenda for that. Maybe they're trying to make people.
Well, no, it's just laziness. It's laziness and poor fact finding. If you can't find out what the name of that glistening, those lights up there, clearly it's a ski run. It's not a town. And,
okay.
and look, I grew up in the Rocky Mountains. If somebody else calls the little bumps they have mountains, I like to say nice hills you have here. You know, the Rockies are real mountains. The rest of them, The Himalayas, the Alps. You know, the Cordillera that runs through South America. Yeah. The Andes, those are mountains. Don't call these little 5,000-foot bumps mountains. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I can get passionate, as you know, Mark, about a lot of things. Thank you so much
here in Arizona, for example, people are unaware until they visit here. One of the reasons that I came here originally, if you drive up to Flagstaff, which is a couple hours north, I used to live in that area, hope to go back, but you've got Mount Humphrey up there, 12,000 feet, and it used to be it's actually an extinct volcano. Real interesting history about that. So, you know, I'm used to comparing some mountains with other mountains, and that's a good example even for local people here. That's a real mountain.
That's a real mountain. Mark, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Have a great week and weekend. Thanks for chatting.
My guest has been Mark Leibovit, editor and publisher of the Leibovit VR newsletters, also known as vrtrader.com. If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.